The next section of this training will feature how to provide constructive feedback. Much of these helpful tips are based on the findings of Lubinsky's work, which were based on the analyses of the American Educational Research Association, ARA, conference context on how reviewing conference proposals differs from that of journal articles. On the screen, there are two text boxes. This is to illustrate that you will be requested to provide two types of feedback. Feedback to the proposal authors, which will be shared with them, and feedback to the program chairs and session coordinators, which will only be shared with the conference committee. Reviewers should assume the author's claims have merit. As a reminder, the goal of a review is to not show how much you know. It's to look for ways to strengthen and improve the author's work by providing clear and insightful reviews. What this typically means is a couple of thoughtful sentences to the author and a few sentences to the program chair and session coordinators. Comments can be extremely heartening or disheartening. It is important to note that unconstructive feedback may further alienate marginalized or ignored people. Even reviewers who recommend rejecting a proposal can provide helpful encouragement to the author. The reviewers who are most helpful to authors do 5 specific things. First, good conference proposal reviewers focus on the most important substantive issues when writing comments to the authors. Second, the most constructive reviews balance critique with positive comments. Third, if you find yourself getting passionate while reviewing, you may need to pause and reread your reviews. Reviewers should not let their own research agenda or pet peeves serve as their dominant lens. In a similar vein, reviewers should not automatically dismiss proposals for lack of perceived fit with the conference theme. A review that is clear and carefully constructed is not only helpful to the author, but also enhances the author's confidence that the review process was carefully executed by knowledgeable reviewers. Therefore, it is critical that you proofread your review before you click submit. You may be tempted to assign a high rating to each category by default, with a recommendation of acceptance unless you have very grave concerns. Although this may seem encouraging to authors, it does not help the authors or the program chairs understand the proposal's strengths and weaknesses. Additionally, overuse of high ratings makes it difficult for session coordinators to efficiently rule out weaker proposals and focus on those that merit further consideration. Reviewers should strive to vary their ratings both within and across proposals to indicate where a proposal is strongest, what aspects could be improved, and which proposals should and should not be included in the conference program. Let's now shift our focus on how to provide thoughtful feedback for the program chairs and session coordinators. It is not helpful to say, "See author's notes," or write lengthy comments that repeat the comments that have already been made to the author, as it only adds to the chairs and coordinators' reading load. Rather, your feedback should be brief, a summarization of the study's focus and contributions, as well as a brief explanation of why you recommend acceptances or rejection of the proposal. Also, the comments to the program chairs can be quite frank and straightforward. Secondly, comments should be consistent with the content of the overall review. For example, a reviewer should not tell the author, "This is an interesting proposal," but then tell the chairs, "This work has already been done." Third, reviewers should feel free to make specific suggestions about the presentation format. Finally, reviewers can alert the chairs and coordinators to any other pertinent issues. Now that you are more familiar with how to provide constructive feedback, let's take a moment to put it into action. In this next activity, you will be asked to identify the negative and/or dismissive comments in several reviewer statements. Then, we ask that you select at least 2 of these statements and rewrite them constructively. It may be helpful to imagine that you are in a conversation with the proposal authors themselves. What would you say? How would you encourage them? Sometimes it's much more difficult to share critique in person, but that's exactly what you should be thinking about as you rewrite these statements. It's not about hiding behind an anonymous comment. It's about having a growth orientation to your feedback and a mindset of development, openness, and humility. So figure out how to say things in a way that motivates and inspires the authors to bring out their best work, and don't forget to clearly communicate how their work connects to the POD Network's values of collaboration, equity, and evidence. I will now read the statements that you are being asked to reflect on. Statement 1. This is useful, but the model techniques are not particularly novel and are already in many facilitators' toolboxes. Statement 2. This is such an important topic. I'd hate to see it excluded, but if it's done poorly, it's potentially damaging. Statement 3. The approach in practice may be a viable one for our times, but you may wish to offer several richer references. Only 2 works are cited, and both are dated despite their relevance. Statement 4. Polling, brainstorming, and think, pair, share can be pretty shallow activities for a lot of very educated and experienced people. So I encourage presenters to think more carefully about what exactly they hope participants will walk away with and identify more challenging activities for the session. Statement 5. I think that the instrument in the session could be valuable. I have reservations about the rigor of content and the thoughtfulness behind the plan for delivery. You should now press pause on the video to complete this brief activity. After you have completed your reflection, please press play to continue with the training. There are several trigger words in these statements, such as not particularly novel, offer richer references, and if it's done poorly, all of which are condescending and likely to deflate the recipients. Additionally, personal judgments have no place in reviewer feedback, such as suggesting that the content lacks rigor, the plan for delivery is not thoughtful, or that particular methodologies are shallow for educated people. The latter further implies that the proposal authors are inexperienced and not highly educated, given that they have opted to use polling, brainstorming, or think, pair, share. In the case of Statement 3, it is never appropriate to put the authors down for dated work. There are always ways to communicate that current scholarship has the potential to strengthen the proposal. Statement 2 is particularly harmful because the reviewers make grand assumptions that the content will be poorly presented and bases their recommendation on this false pretense. The irony of this reviewer's feedback is that the comment itself is damaging. It is poorly thought through and insensitive. In Statement 1, we need to ask ourselves, whose toolbox matters? Perhaps individuals newer to the field of educational development could benefit from the model techniques proposed by the authors. And as we grow and have more experiences, we hear things differently. So there's always something to add to your toolbox, even if the techniques are well known to you because we're listening to it differently than we did before. There are so many ways to deconstruct these comments. Maybe you found even more ways than mentioned here. This concludes the formal portion of the reviewer training. We wanted to take a moment to thank you for being an integral part of the annual conference's success. We couldn't do it without your hard work, commitment, and dedication to the POD network. So thank you for all that you do and for your time and energy participating in this training. This training was developed and audio narrated by myself, Pamela Roy, as the Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Consultant to the POD Conference Committee, and in consultation with the 2021, 2022, and 2023 POD Conference teams and the 2021 and 2023 Ad Hoc Committee for Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion. These members include, in alphabetical order, Janet Cape, Jess Clausen, Lynn Eaton, Kristen English, Teresa Fuckerell, Christopher Gerbau, Claudia Cornejo Hapel, Carol Hernandez, Chad Hershock, Hogue Holmgren, Hyung Kim, Antonia Levy, Tammy McCoy, Mandy McGrew, Jose Muñez, Jared Quinn, Cheryl Richardson, Artina Samkian, Carol Sabina Sullivan, Herman Vargas Ramos, and Tanya Whitehead.